Welcome to Amir Shakti 5858 War and Love Reports. I am Amir Goodman. Mass shooting in Jacksonville, Florida has left multiple people dead, according to city's mayor. The mayor also said the victims were inside a Dollar General store. The news of PBS News Hour for tonight. The controversial practice of unpaid internship and what they mean for young people starting their careers. Mali's former foreign minister discusses the rise of coup in West African nations. An innovative Colorado art exhibit sparks collaborations between artists and farmers. A farmer, this was a great opportunity to use a different language to talk about farms, explore it from this artistic perspective. It is so exciting. We will watch reports on those later. First, the world news. One day after Uli Uliares, Spain Soccer Federation player, he defiantly said he was not quitting. FIFA said he was suspended him for 90 days while investigates his conduct in Women World Cup final. During the medal ceremony, he grabbed a player's head and kissed her on the lips. The player says she never consented. Nearly 80 members said they will. Rather, 80 members of the squad said they won't play as long as Rubiales has his job. 4 astronauts are on the way to the International Space Station for 6 months. They belong to 4 different countries. The crew that marched before dawn today is from the United States, Denmark, Japan, and Russia. It's the first time that each crew member is from a different country. They are set to arrive tomorrow to a space station tomorrow morning. Thousands gathered to Lincoln Memorial to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington in Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech that I Have a Dream. Speakers included Dr. Martin Luther King's granddaughter, said the dream of equality and justice remains unfulfilled. President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris was welcomed the King's family on the Monday, which is the actual anniversary of the march. Bob Barker has died for 35. He hosted the Price is Right. The Price is Right is the longest running TV game show ever. Bob Barker said,
Barker retired from the show in 2007.
They have invited me into their homes for more than 50 years.
Now a report on unpaid internship by John Young of PBS and his associates. Bob Barker was 99 years old.
Internships can give students a leg up starting their careers. According to the National Association of Colleges and Employers, more than half of internships lead to full-time jobs, and people with internship experience receive more job offers and higher starting salaries than those without it. But nearly half of last year's interns in the United States were unpaid. Earlier, I spoke with Washington Post reporter Kelsey Abels, who's written about this issue. I asked her how big a factor pay is for young people choosing an internship.
I guess there are a range of different experiences. Some people just kind of decide to go with the sacrifice of taking one of these unpaid internships, and that can mean, working extra hours. I spoke to one person who said he walked home from his internship because paying for transportation was too expensive. And then there are other people who have to do these internships for academic credit. Some people are lucky enough to be funded by their parents, but some people end up having to work extra jobs and all of that. But for some people, it's really pivotal. I mean, one person that I spoke to, she said that, she was looking at 3 different internships. One was unpaid, but it was at a nonprofit that she was really excited about. The other was paid, but not paid very well. It was at a think tank. And then this third option was at an investment bank, and it was incredibly well paid, more than twice as much as the think tank. She did not have financial support from her parents. She was a first-generation college student, and the only option she had was to take the investment bank. And she said that now, sometimes she even feels bad talking about it because it doesn't feel like it represents like who she is or what she wants to do going forward, but that was kind of what was necessary, she said, to get by.
Are there certain types of students who are more likely than not to base a decision on whether or not they're going to get paid for the summer?
When you look for people who do unpaid internships, often you find people who do have their parents' financial support. And some of those people I spoke to, they said that they were grateful for that, but they recognize that this is impossible for everyone.
Does that skew or put disparities into the system of who gets this boost, this leg up of having an internship?
It does, but it also kind of creates 2 tiers of internships. Some data has shown that the people who are most offered unpaid internships tend to be people of color and women. So this kind of creates this kind of fracture where you have some people who are being paid and some people who aren't, and unpaid internships also are less often to lead to jobs. They have been shown not to establish interns in the kind of industry in the same way that paid internships do. So it creates this kind of division starting at the very beginning of when you are starting, not even your first job, but your kind of like first step into the working world.
Are there fields or industries that are more likely than others to offer only unpaid internships?
So when you look at unpaid internships, it helps at first to divide into 2 different categories. So there are academic unpaid internships and open market unpaid internships. So academic internships are internships that are required for the completion of an academic degree. These happen in areas like social work, where you're expected to do field work, in areas like psychology, where you're expected to kind of treat patients as you go through and get maybe a master's in clinical psychology. But then open market internships are internships that are sort of, they're more unregulated. They're not really attached to any degree program. They're kind of just maybe a volunteer opportunity that's been kind of morphed into an internship. For example, the European Parliament recently voted in favor of a report that calls for banning unpaid internships, but specifically open market unpaid internships. It does not take issue with the academic version of them. Then kind of the other areas that you run into them tend to be lesser funded areas. So a lot of museums, kind of arts areas, theaters, that kind of discipline you can find unpaid internships in. Media is known for having unpaid internships, unfortunately. And then there's kind of another category, which is areas where they probably could be paid, but it's not really clear why. Some experts say that they're just kind of, those places are ignoring the ethics of needing to pay people for work, and those tend to be in government areas. So a lot of government internships are also unpaid. Actually, it's kind of interesting. The White House just started paying interns last year.
You mentioned the media. I should note that the PBS News Hour does pay the interns who come work for us. So you talk about the ethics of this. The benefits for the employer are evident. They get free labor. But does U.S. labor law say anything about this?
So, there actually is some justification in the law that allows for this. It kind of depends on who is considered the primary beneficiary of an internship. But that also is a little bit of a gray area, how you kind of define that. So basically the idea is, if you can make a case that the intern is the primary beneficiary, it kind of can function as an extension of the classroom, and in that case, it's okay. But I did talk to a legal expert about this, and he was kind of like, I tend to advise people to pay because I have often run into people who think, oh, it's an intern, it's someone from college, like I can get away without paying them. But it's really not that simple. You need to kind of have a structure where it functions more like a classroom, and the benefit is to the intern.
You mentioned the European Parliament voting to ban unpaid open market internships. Are there any similar efforts in the United States or any similar efforts elsewhere in the world?
There have been some small efforts in the United States, but I do not think any of them have been successful. They'll say that there is, in France, they have actually successfully banned open market internships, and if you have an intern for more than 2 months, they have to be paid. Experts say that is kind of the most systematic approach that they've seen.
Why do you think there's no effort like that in the United States?
I think that what the experts often say is that when the economy is not doing great, the burden falls on the young people, and they're kind of expected to make do. I think that the reality is that there will always be people who are willing to take these internships, whether it's because they have parents who can help them pay their bills, or because they'll, end up working 18 hours a day just to get by because it makes sense career-wise. I think that when people will take them, they'll continue to exist.
Kelsey Abels of the Washington Post, thank you very much.
Now a report on West African coups by John Yan and his associates of PBS. Over to John Yan.
In just 3 years, 6 West African nations have seen the military seize control of the government. While there are unifying factors running through these coups, Ali Rogan tells us that looking at each case individually helps explain what's going on.
The countries are laid out like a belt, hugging a northern stretch of the African continent. From the Atlantic Ocean to the Red Sea, Africa has seen a domino effect of political uprisings across these 6 nations. 4 of them are former colonies of France. They gained independence in the late 1950s and early 60s, but anti-French sentiment still runs high there today. Russia, meanwhile, has capitalized on that attitude, spreading anti-Western propaganda throughout the region. The mercenary Wagner group, run by former Putin ally Evgeny Prigozhin until his presumed death this week, has fighters on the ground in Mali and Sudan. But focusing on foreign influences ignores each country's internal politics and security, as well as the effects they have on each other. To discuss those elements, I'm joined by Kamisa Kamara. She is a senior Africa advisor at the nonpartisan U.S. Institute of Peace and previously served as Mali's Minister of Foreign Affairs and as Presidential Chief of Staff. Kamisa, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, you heard the commonalities I just laid out. Why are they imperfect lenses through which to discuss this spate of coups, and are, though, any of these commonalities at all instructive in any way?
Well, the first commonality that observers usually mention is that all of these countries are former French colonies. We've had successful coups in Sudan recently, but also coup attempts in Guinea-Bissau, which is a country that was colonized by the Portuguese. We've had a coup attempt recently in Sao Tome and Principe, same story. And so all of the 3 countries that I just mentioned have not necessarily been colonized by the French. But I believe that the reason why France is mentioned so often in the recent military coups in West Africa is because France, as a Western power, has been definitely extremely present in domestic politics, but also in security assistance. And so France has become the easy culprit. One overarching issue is definitely the security threat, the terrorist threat that we've seen in the region for the past 10 years and more. And because of the security situation, these countries have had to require international security assistance, and this has definitely played a role in how domestic politics have played out, but also how presidents have also used security as a way to strengthen their stature internationally.
What background do these coup leaders have? Again, underscoring, they are all different. These are all different countries, but some of the coup leaders you've mentioned actually know each other.
If we look at the places where they have been trained, there are definitely connections that have been made. Some of them knew one another. There's definitely a trio there, especially the Burkina Faso, Mali, and Guinea. And what I also want to highlight is that military coup leaders are very often portrayed as passive actors in the post-coup situation, which is definitely not the case. And as we've seen in the case of Niger, the Nigerian junta has made connections very quickly with the juntas in Burkina, in Mali, and in Guinea to seek their support in the case of a military intervention by the ECOWAS.
As these coups have taken place, it seems like there have been increases in the amount of Islamist extremist attacks that occur, that follow. Is there a connection there?
I have read many research that suggests that what happens on the front is that military officials and military leaders, the ones who are fighting, are actually demoralized by the fact of their leaders have become politicians, basically. And so they either refuse to fight, or there is some sort of vacuum that takes place in the remote areas of the countries that definitely make these terrorist attacks increase in intensity, but also in frequency.
The presence of the Wagner Group, as I mentioned, present in several countries. We have seen people waving Russian flags in the wake of these coups. What is your response to that? Is the influence of Russia overstated in these cases?
It's always overstated. These Russian flags that you see right after a coup has taken place have been planted there. I have absolutely no doubt about that. I do not believe that Russia is an important player in this region. I believe that there is definitely a Russian propaganda at play, but culturally, and even I'm looking at these youth in West Africa, they speak French, most of them. They study in French, and they either want to immigrate to France or the United States. I do not see any of them queuing in front of the Russian embassy.
Based on this recent spate of coups, what are your thoughts and hopes for the future of this region, especially when it comes to the overwhelmingly young populations?
Well, two things. The first, what I'm seeing is that the democracy as we understand it in the West has not been that successful in some African countries, including the ones that have recently experienced the coup. And so, first of all, what I'm hoping is that the youth in these countries define their own path and design the institutions that they want to see. And my second hope is that we as international partners put our emphasis on the private sector, which will be able to create the jobs that will be needed in the next few years when these millions of youth will come onto the job market seeking a better future.
Kamisa Kamara with the U.S. Institute of Peace, thank you so much for your time.
For a look at an innovative art exhibit, multimedia collaborations between artists and farmers to explore the similarities between the two fields. Let's watch a report on this by John of PBS.
A vegetable from a small organic farm in the Rockies becomes an Asian dish cooked on a food cart in a museum gallery. Hundreds of dried corn stalks fill a wall at another Boulder County museum, and a series of embroidery panels with images of wildflowers hang in a 140-year-old barn. They're all part of a multi-venue exhibition called Agriculture, Art Inspired by the Land. More than 15 local and national artists and collectives teamed with Boulder County farmers to create the works now on display at 2 museums and 3 local farms. Organizers say the goal was to explore our relationship with nature.
It's not a typical art show. It's not a typical gallery experience.
Jamie Kopke coordinates it all as lead curator.
It allowed us to explore a topic which I think is just so vital to all of us in these times, and that's how people are connecting or being disconnected from the natural world around us. The disconnection from nature has created a whole host of problems in our lives.
Every season's a new opportunity to have another relationship with a plant. So
yeah,
here we are.
I know, here we are, like months later.
Yeah.
From the little seedlings to this lush field.
Artist Yumi Janera Roth and organic farmer Mark Daraspinas teamed up to grow Kang Kong, a vegetable sometimes called water spinach. While not well known in the United States, it's a staple in Asian countries like the Philippines, where Janera Roth's mother was born.
The plants she grew up with and the plants that she had access to in the U.S., she had to do a lot of food substitutions. So kangkong was one of these things that was really interesting to me because I would eat the foods, but I would eat it without the sort of this core vegetable that was in it. In the United States, it's considered an invasive weed, and I was interested in this idea of it like as something invasive or illegal, and when you attach that to a plant, and then what happens when it's actually the core of somebody else's diet.
Having this opportunity to give people this meaningful connection with a plant, not a product, not something you buy in the store, but with a plant that you can watch grow from a seed and bring it to harvest and then bring into your kitchen and then feed yourselves or your community with. This was just a great opportunity to sort of almost use different language to think about farming as well.
Experimental has been...
Jane Burke of the Boulder Museum of Contemporary Art is another of the project's 3 curators. She says
Thank
the
you for
collaborative
watching
nature of the
and
project
privilege of your
cultivated
time.
the artist's
This is
creativity.
Amir
This
Shakil
has challenged
5858.
their work. It has
I am
made them
Amir
kind of think outside of
Goodman.
their normal practice by incorporating
Have a
really
good
these
life.
philosophies of the farmers. For me personally, it's really inspired me to look at farmers in a different way.